Listen, I got my tiny mic, and I'm here to talk about Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul, the new movie starring Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. Now, I didn't go into this one with high expectations at all. As a matter of fact, the only reason I watched it is because my cousin Quinice and I, we often exchange movies, and she tagged me in this one. And I had seen it prior, but I said, I'm not about to watch that. I just, figured it was one of those trash films that's going to poke fun at the church. And in a way, I was right. But if you go into this movie expecting it to be literal, then you're already going into it the wrong way. It's meant to be satirical. In other words, it is shedding light on real events. And the moment I started watching it, almost from the moment I got into the meat and crust of the movie, I realized that it was really centered around the Bishop Eddie Long scandal, whereas all of those young men from his church started accusing him of sexual molestation and coercing them with trips and cars and money and scholarships to his Longfellow Academy program. If you don't know about it, I would urge you to go and look it up. But the movie, it gets into those events, but of course, it's about the fictional pastor Lee Curtis Childs and his wife Trinity Childs, and there were so many pivotal scenes in that movie. There were so many pivotal events that took place that kind of shed light on the bigger issue surrounding the church. Now, it's very ironic that they chose the Baptist church, and I'm not even going to get into that. But in one scene, Trinity says that Lee Curtis grew up Baptist and she grew up apostolic. So already there was, some clashing of the denominations right there. But in essence, he is caught up in a huge scandal, whereas some boys accuse him of molestation, again, along the veins of Bishop Eddie Long, and she's there to pick up the pieces. Now, growing up in church and growing up in ministry are two totally different things. Those are two different sides of the same coin, okay? You can go to church all you want to, but until you're behind the scenes, until you are thrust into the position to actually see the way that things operate, you're not going to understand this film. I've seen a lot of people do commentary on it on YouTube, on TikTok, on different platforms, and I didn't want to become too wrapped up in their thoughts because I wanted to form opinions of my own. And I will tell you that it is so tragic how the first lady is often left to be the one to pick up the pieces. Lee Curtis, if you guys hadn't realized it, if you've seen the film, he was narcissistic. Everything revolved around him. Every time she said no, he had to say yes. Every time he came up with an idea, she had to be the one to formulate it. And at one point she says that he might be the head and the face of the church, but she is the neck and the spine. And if you don't know about the neck and spine's function in the body, it holds everything up. And that right there was so eye-opening to me when I realized just the sheer amount of embarrassment he had caused this woman. But every step of the way, she stood by her man. At one point, as the title conveys, they're outside, they're holding a sign. Well, she's holding the sign that says Honk for Jesus. And they're out there in front of their church, and cars are going by, and they're trying to get people to honk so that they can draw attention to the fact that they're about to open their church, because following the scandal, the church shut down. So the whole movie is based on them hiring a camera crew to film their lives and to see how they live on a day-to-day basis, to show the people that they're not who the media portrayed them to be. But during this time, they're constantly having to yell cut because they're cussing, they're rapping to secular music, doing all types of stuff, which shows that people in leadership, people in ministry are still people. Yes, we see them as shepherds. Yes, we see them as being held to a higher esteem, a higher standard, but it shows how people of the cloth are so harshly judged, and they can't let their hair down. They can't be who they are. Now, yes, at one point, he has to tell the people, I'm a sinner. And of course, they're looking at him like, but sir, like, you're this huge pastor of this mega church. Everybody knows you. You already have all of this stuff going on, and you're going to add to it with these shenanigans. And I laughed through this film because through everything that they went through, the camera crew never stopped filming. So they caught a lot of things, and in those things, they're asking them to edit certain things out because they have temper tantrums, they have fights, they have spats, they have arguments. But one scene that stuck out to me is when Regina Hall's character calls her mom and she starts crying. So the mom comes over and they have breakfast, and she tells her mom, he was a little riled up, so I had to give him 2 Ambien so that he could get some rest. And at that point, she tells her mom that she feels like she can't stay in this marriage. She can't do it. And instead of her mother being a mother and hearing her child out and supporting her and really trying to understand why it is that she feels like she can't proceed in this marriage, she tells her to pray. She tells her she sounds foolish. This is your husband. You know how many times I wanted to quit your daddy, but I stayed with him. And Regina's character asks her, well, what made you stop going to the Bible when dealing with daddy? And the mother says, when I buried him. So in other words, those vows, that's it. And I know a lot of biblical scholars, they're going to say, well, yeah, marriage is a sacred institution. That is what you're supposed to do. The vows say to death do us part. But how far do you have to go in the trenches to realize some things are just irreconcilable? This man, her husband, at one point is in the church's gym talking to one of the film crew, and he tries to seduce this man. And he tells him, well, my boyfriend digs it. He digs my scruffy beard. He's okay with the way that I look. And that right there, you guys, that was an eye-opening scene, because it shows that no matter how healed and delivered he professed to be, at the end of the day, he still had those desires, and his wife was right there having to sleep with that. And there is a scene when they get intimate and he can't perform with her. So he tries to do it himself. And when he can't do that, he asks her to go down on him, because that is the only way that he can get off. And what does that mimic to you? I'm not going to, push this imagery in anybody's head, but you guys have an imagination. You know exactly where they were going with that. And so it really was realistic in that regard. It was meant to be dark comedy. It was meant to be religious comedy. But for me, there were so many moments that I cringed because I've seen that stuff in action. It was to a point myself, I got to a place where I felt like true holiness doesn't exist because of the things that you see in ministry. But as I grew and as I expounded on those things and why I felt the way that I felt, I realized that these are just people. These are imperfect people. And the Bible tells us, gifts and calls are without repentance. So not to say that these people are not worthy of the call, but they still have flesh. They still have a human side. And that doesn't excuse the things that people like Bishop Eddie Long do every single day. But it does explain it. And Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul, it just was. It gave. If they don't get nominations for that movie, I don't know who is more deserving, because every aspect of ministry, I feel like they embodied, down to them performing, how he was going to give his big old speech at opening day to tell the people that he apologizes. Sir, if you have to practice it, it ain't coming from your heart. And his wife tells him as much. She's like, well, if that's from your soul, then you need to practice a little more to make it more convincing. And so he does this time and time again, and you find yourself getting irritated because you're like, do you mean it or do you not? And not only that, this movie delves so deep into church hurt. The scene where the young man comes and he confronts the pastor for everything that he's ever put him through. I mean, this young man is so full that he holds up traffic. And this is in an Atlanta suburb now. So people are behind him. They're blowing the horn. He doesn't care. He's undeterred. He's unmoved. And he walks up to him and he basically tells him, you ruined my life. And he said, we don't need you here. People's lives are so much better without you here. He said, I looked up to you once. And that darn near broke my heart, because I know what it feels like to be hurt in church. I know what it feels like to look up to somebody and the only thing they can see you as a sexual being. You know, that right there, that type of stuff happens every single day. And again, going to church and growing up in ministry, two totally different things. So of course you're going to go into it. If you just go to church, you're going to go into it with a certain lens, and it's going to look funny to you, and it's going to look like, oh, this is ridiculous. Why would they even make something like this? But if you're in ministry and you've been behind the scenes, then you know what this movie is trying to say. And I feel like whoever wrote it, and I'm going to look that up by the time that I put this video out into the world. Whoever wrote this, they really did their homework, or they experienced it, because experience is the greatest teacher. And art often imitates life if you guys don't realize it. So I would say that this movie, especially for preachers' kids, especially for children who go to church, and I probably wouldn't watch it, you know, before age 18, because there are some mature themes. But if you're looking to understand, if you're seeking to understand, this film is going to help you look beyond those lights and the cameras and the fancy things that these people out here have, and they're seducing you with them. And he preaches so much about his cars and his helicopter, his house, all of this stuff, everything that he has, it's all materialistic to him. He's not interested in saving souls. And so this younger couple who used to be congregants of their church, they go and start to open their own church. So Lee Curtis and Trinity, they go to those people's church and they try to persuade them not to open up on Easter Sunday, because they said that their church needs a revival more than this church needs a revival, because ever since all the members left their church, they went down to the younger couple's church. So they've been taking all of their members anyway. So they beg them, or they try to coerce them not to open up on Easter Sunday, which is the day that they felt like, you know, it would symbolize Jesus's resurrection. And so when the people do not immediately agree not to do that, Lee Curtis and his bright ideas, he says, well, we can move our church. We'll open it on this Sunday. And the younger couple, being pure and having prayed on it, they're thinking the same thing. They just haven't been able to get the news to them first. So that Sunday when the child go to open up, the Sumters are opening it up as well, and everybody flocks over there. So the whole thing fell before it even got started, you know. And when he has her out there holding that sign, he tells her she needs to go and put on her mime makeup and stuff so that she can do a praise dance while she's out there. So it's going to draw the people. None of their performative arts drew anybody. The only people that it drew are the spectators. They got cursed out there. That young man came and confronted them, and it's comical in a way, but once you realize that this actually happens, this is real life, you know, people actually went through this, it's not funny anymore. At least it wasn't to me. But I feel like this movie was so tastefully done. I feel like if you go into it with the correct lens, then you'll actually get the message out of it. Church hurt is a real thing. You know, sexual abuse, it doesn't just come from the outside. It doesn't just come from home. These things happen every single day. I've seen it with my own eyes, and not that everybody in the church is like that. So please don't get me wrong when I say that. But the church is just a place. It's just four walls at the end of the day. The people in there are still human. Yes, that might be the closest thing to God that some of us see on a a weekly basis, however you want to say it. But it's still not God. People are still inhuman. They're imperfect, and they're still bound to make mistakes. And I think at the end of the day, that is what this movie was trying to portray. And it's trying to make you take a good hard look at yourself and how pastors and these leaders are exploiting people every single day. They move into these impoverished areas, and they come and they entice these young people who come from impoverished backgrounds with all this fancy stuff, with these trips, shoes, everything else, because that's what the young man said in it. And Bishop Eddie Long's story, it parallels this. So these people were enticed based on the need that they had, based on the lack that they had. And he used the church as a covering. And if you guys don't think that this is really happening, then I would urge you to open up your eyes. Many are called, few are chosen. That might be the slogan of the army, but it's so relevant today in the church. And once again, this movie does a stellar job of bringing those themes to light. If Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown are not nominated for something, then I will know that this whole Oscar, Academy, Tony, all of that is a sham, because these people they embodied people that they are not. They took method acting to a whole other level. I felt everything that they said. I felt, even when the one young man came up and he told him, I don't believe you did that. I don't believe what the news is saying, because that's how people are brainwashed. They look at people's status and they look past what it is that they might be capable of, simply because they look the part. They look like they are rich enough to not be as depraved as people are saying that they are. So therefore, all of their excuses and all of their sins are forgiven. It's white clean. And I just do not get that, because, as I said, I've been there. I've seen that. I've been that one crying out, saying this one and this one is just like this. And other people are saying they won't believe me because they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe it. And this movie, it took me back to those places. It took me to a place where I did not know that I wasn't prepared to go, but I wasn't. But I'm so glad that I stuck it out and I made it through, because by the end of it, I was on the other side of some things. I was able to get the revelation in it. And yes, it's funny. Yes, it is comical. But there is a message there if you want to receive it. So those are my thoughts, Quinice, on Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul. This is why I liked it, Cuddy. I hope it opens up your eyes to my point of view. If you've seen this movie and you watched this video and you made it all the way through, I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear what you agree on, what you disagree on. Let's have a discussion. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching.